Hi everybody. Today we are going to talk about migration and communities in developed countries, the case of Maghreb immigrants. We are first going to introduce our subject, then we are going through communities, reasons of immigration, focus on Marseille, and then conclude. The increasing scale of immigration worldwide in the later years of this century has made this phenomenon one of the major problems facing governments. Arab immigration, which exists in the 5 continents, is a very old phenomenon that has undergone different evolutions in time and space, depending on its concentration by geographical area, country of origin, and period of migration. For its part, the destination has always been conditioned by the local, regional, and international geopolitical context. In this way, the itinerary and the destinations are dependent on the historical events that have followed one another. The causes of this migration have varied over time. For example, intra-Algerian migration to Morocco, Tunisia, and Syria, a migration that dates back to France's colonization of Algeria in 1930. This is also the case of Palestinians who, after the Nakba of 1948, took refuge in Jordan and Syria. In both cases, it is an exile allowing to escape the oppression of an occupant. At the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, Arab immigration took another turn. The Turkish presence in the Middle East, the Missouri and Algeria are the origin of another type of migration. America and Europe have become the new destinations of Arab migrants. The discovery of oil, and more specifically the economic boom in the countries of Iraq, Persian Gulf, Libya and Iraq, have drained thousands of workers from Egypt, Palestine, Morocco, of Tunisia and other foreign nationals. Thus, the weight and choice of country of destination are closely linked to various factors: colonization, job offer, migration policy, etc. The destination of Arab migrants has not always been the same and has evolved over time, depending on the context and migration policy of the host country. While some countries of destination are sometimes sought after by migrants from various Arab countries for a long time, others are only too late. North American is a very old destination for Middle Eastern Arabists, where it's relatively recent for the Maghrebi. Although some host countries are already considered very old homes, others have just been discovered by some migrants over the past few decades or even just a few years ago. These countries include Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Spain, Italy, and the Scandinavian countries. Some host countries are better known than others for their strong presence, such as France for the number of Maghrebi, while the Latin American countries are distinguished by the large number of Lebanese or Syro-Lebanese. Our first question concerns the number of migrants who make up this immigration. How many Arabs are there outside of their country's origin? Historically, Arab immigration to Europe has been directed towards 2 countries, the United Kingdom and France, both former colonial powers of the Arab world. In Great Britain, the main component of Arab migrations come from the Middle East, Egypt, Sudan, Palestine, etc., while in France, they come mainly from the Maghreb. Through this migratory phenomenon, it is essentially the historical ties that the Arab countries have kept with their colonial metropolises. Language and cultural and linguistic knowledge are also from another factor that migrants highlight in their migration project in order to facilitate their integration into the host society. Much later, Arab immigration spread to other European countries with old stains. First of all, the Western European countries, such as Germany, Belgium, and the Netherlands, have returned to Arab immigration as well as the Scandinavian countries. Mediterranean Europe, Spain, Italy, and Greece, on the other hand, was until the 1970s composed of countries supplying labor. It did not become a host region for Arab migrants, among others, until much later. Now, the reasons of Maghreb migration in France. Maghreb immigration in Europe and especially in France now has tradition dating back to the beginning of the last century. Sometimes free and spontaneous, sometimes to control and regulate, sometimes forced. It expresses by this variation and fluctuations a whole past of economic, social and political relations between the 2 shores of the Mediterranean. Like any international migration, Maghreb migration to Europe has been and remains very sensitive to conjecture. Maghreb migration to Europe is older than generally imagined. The first Algerian migrants to come in France were itinerant traders from 1970. Workers in the industry began to come from the 20th century. They were followed a few years ago by the first Moroccans. In 1912, a survey carried out by the Office of Algeria estimated the number of Algerians between 4,000 and 5,000 in France. They worked mainly in the industries of Port of Marseille, in the Metropolitan Yard in Paris, or in the mines of northern France. On the eve of the First World War, the number of Algerians in France is estimated at 30,000. During this conflict, France organizes in North Africa an immigration force to supplement its needs as a soldier and worker. 132,000 North Africans have replaced the French mobilized in the war, either on farms, armaments, factories, or in the service of stewardship. But after the armistice, most of these workers were repatriated to North Africa. In 1919, there were only about 10,000. In 1930, the foreign population residing in France represents 4%. Since 1946, there has been an increasingly massive and diversified development of North African migration to Europe. The largest increase was recorded by Algeria, whose number of immigrants in France rose from 50,000 in 1946 to 700,000 in January 1971. In total, there is at least 1 million people from Maghreb in France at the beginning of 1971. In the same way, the enlargement of migratory flows can also be seen in Europe, since between 75,000 and 80,000 North Africans are divided between Belgium, the Netherlands, and the Federal Republic of Germany. The problem of unemployment and underemployment remains an essential driver of migration to Europe. It is certainly very difficult to estimate the importance of this phenomenon, but their reality is no doubt. The number of unemployed is considered nearly 900,000 in Algeria according to the 1966 census, counting the people entering the labor market this year. The problem has been steadily aggravated by the demographic upsurge, which has doubled the population of North Africa within 30 years. The changes that Maghreb societies have experienced since the independence favor the outbreak of mass and widespread immigration. Political causes are not to be neglected. The disorganization of traditional societies by colonization has contributed to the mobility of families and individuals. The destruction of villages and the regrouping of the population provoked by the War of Algeria accuses the phenomenon. It is nonetheless true that the essential cause of immigration is economic. Our focus will now spot Marseille, how those communities have found their place in France. Marseille, second biggest city after Paris, is one of the European capitals of the Maghreb communities. After the Second World War, France called for immigration. With the rapid economic growth in France and the decolonization, communities from the Maghreb are coming for a new life in Europe. Because of its location, Marseille is one of the most efficient access to France for lots of immigrants. The harbor of Marseille is also one of the biggest factors of these relationships. Earlier in history, and this is still true nowadays, the harbor is one of the most solicited ones when it comes to business and tourism. Because of this large and heterogeneous immigration, Marseille is known for a very rich city when it comes to talk about culture. In fact, many communities such as les Pieds Noirs, Berbers, or Jewish are passing through Marseille. Some even stay. Many of them are staying in the center and later in the northern suburbs. Those communities help to build a new city in a large way, make France great again. For Jean-Claude Juan, Marseille is probably one of the most cosmopolitan cities of the Mediterranean. Respect is a word that Marseille knows. In fact, same if this city is one of the biggest points of immigration, the result between communities is much more satisfying than in the rest of the country. Because of many different waves of immigration from different communities, Marseille welcomes them with respect and made this city a real example of multicultural metropole. Nowadays, you can still find a real attachment to this immigration and their roots. This impact on the culture is very strong. As Flaubert describes in 1940, a beautiful city, where we feel something oriental. In the food culture, the tradition, architecture, and even in the language. To establish the main characteristics of migration, we need to recapitulate relevant countries of immigration, such as Egypt, Iraq, Palestine, Syria, or Maghreb. The Arab immigration takes place within a lot of area. France and United Kingdom for the main part, and the rest went to many places like Belgium, the Netherlands, Australia, and the United States of America. Many reasons can demonstrate each immigration. Leave your countries is not simple fact. You can do it in order to obtain a better life condition for your family, but you can also try to avoid war or other dictator. After the First World War, France became a nice place for migrants thanks to the job offer and the aim of grow up the country totally destroyed. Their goal is to obtain the right to become French. On the other hand, after the reconstruction, some of these workers were repatriated to their countries of origin. Furthermore, they were used to fight in Algerian War. A lot of families were separated, and France represented a nice place to reconstruct this family. We focused on Marseille to show the most cosmopolitan place in France. The harbor of Marseille makes a huge difference for migrants. Located really close to North Africa, it is the easier way for migrants to come. Multiculturalism represents a relevant fact in Marseille. It became a real part of its culture in daily operation. Many nationalities were present, and they respect each other. Furthermore, with the Museum of Europeans and Mediterranean communities, Marseille includes immigration within their past history and use it as a strength.